Cole Merrick had never been afraid of hard work. On the dusty frontier planet of Syndralis, courage was not a choice, it was a necessity. The land stretched for miles, a sea of red sand broken by jagged crystal cliffs and the occasional scattered settlement. Storms swept across the plains without warning, and predators, strange and deadly, hunted anyone careless enough to linger. Humanity had claimed only a fragile hold on this world, and Cole knew every day could be his last. His small homestead sat at the edge of the plains, a cluster of worn buildings surrounded by fences patched with metal scraps. Cole had lived here for years, alone but never lonely. He had friends, neighbors who trusted him to help when trouble came, and he always answered. Survival was a chain, and he refused to let it break. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Cole was checking the barn doors when a soft, strange noise stopped him. It was not the creak of old wood or the call of desert predators. It was a cry, small and trembling, full of fear. He froze, listening. The sound came again, a tiny, desperate wail that seemed almost human in its pleading. He tightened his grip on the wooden beam he had been holding and slowly pushed open the barn door. Dust swirled in the last rays of sunlight, and the shadows shifted. At first he saw nothing but old hay and empty stalls. Then movement caught his eye. Small shapes huddled in a corner, trembling, their eyes wide and wet. Cole's heart stopped. They were dragons. Small, fragile, and alone. Their scales were dull, covered in dust, and their wings too weak to lift them. The biggest of them looked at him, eyes filled with pain and confusion. They were silent now, save for the shallow breaths of fear. Cole stepped closer, cautious but calm. He knew what rules this world demanded. Leave them and they would die. Take them in and he risked his safety, his food, and perhaps even his life. But when the smallest dragon crawled toward him, head low, its eyes pleading, something deep inside him stirred. He knelt slowly, keeping his hands visible, showing no threat. The dragon's little body shook as it pressed closer. Cole felt a strange warmth rise in his chest, a mixture of pity, hope, and determination. No human had asked for dragons here, yet now they depended on him. He glanced around the barn, thinking fast. He had only a few supplies, old blankets, scraps of food, and water. It would not be enough to feed even one creature for long, let alone a whole family. But Cole had always solved impossible problems with what he had. He could build, he could trap, he could fight, and he could plan. This time, survival would demand all of that, and more. As he worked to gather the dragons gently into the corner, he realized the first danger was not from the outside, but from the inside. The dragons were scared, wild instincts barely suppressed. One hissed sharply when he touched it, another flailed with tiny claws, and a faint, smoky breath escaped their noses. Cole remained calm, speaking softly, soothing them. He had seen fear before, on settlers, on animals, even on himself. It could be controlled or it could destroy everything. The barn was quiet except for the soft sounds of the creatures and the wind brushing against the outer walls. Cole looked at the sky. Night would fall soon, and the desert was no place for weak or unprotected beings. He knew raiders sometimes passed near here, hunting rare creatures for trade. If they discovered the dragons, the barn would be attacked and he would have no warning. Protecting them meant staying alert, ready to act, and thinking faster than any threat. He placed the largest dragon on an old haystack, giving it a small bowl of water. The smallest curled against his boot. Cole felt a pang of something he had not allowed himself to feel in years, responsibility so heavy it almost hurt. Yet it was not fear, it was resolve. He would not let them die. Not on his watch. Hours passed as he arranged a small safe space, stacking old barrels and crates to form barriers. Each movement was careful, measured, and deliberate. He whispered to the dragons, telling them to stay close, promising protection. They seemed to sense it, huddling together, eyes still wary but calmer. As the last rays of the twin suns disappeared, a sound from the plains drew his attention. A faint, metallic hum, almost rhythmic, like engines moving across sand. Cole's eyes narrowed. Raiders. They were close, maybe closer than he realized. His jaw tightened and his mind raced. The night would be long. His barn was no longer just a shelter. It had become a shield, a battleground for the survival of beings far beyond anything the frontier had ever seen. He clenched his fists, feeling the weight of impossible odds pressing down. Yet, deep inside, a spark of something human, courage, determination, and relentless ingenuity, fired to life. This was his choice. Protect the dragons or let the world claim them. And Cole Merrick had never backed down from a fight. The hum grew louder, echoing over the sand. Shadows moved near the barn's edges. He swallowed, braced himself and whispered to the dragons, "Stay close. We're not done yet." The night had just begun. Cole spent the first hours of night watching the barn and the plains beyond. The twin moons cast silver light over the red sand, making shadows dance like ghosts. The dragons huddled close to him, trembling but alive. Their small, smoky breaths mixed with the scent of hay and sweat, and Cole's mind raced, planning their survival. Each second brought new danger. Sindralis was not a forgiving world, and life, or death, came fast. He knew raiders would be drawn here. Rare creatures, especially young dragons, could fetch a fortune in the black markets of the outer colonies. The metallic hum he had heard earlier was no mistake. Engines, precise and deadly, were moving closer, sliding over the dunes like predators stalking prey. Cole checked the barn's weak fence. It was barely enough to hold a human against a sandstorm, let alone weapons or vehicles with energy blades. He had to improvise fast. Cole ran to the toolshed and grabbed old scrap metal, wires, and whatever he could use for traps. He rigged motion sensors from broken colony equipment, connecting them to small flares he had saved for emergencies. Any movement outside the barn would trigger the flares, blinding raiders and giving him a few precious seconds to act. Next, he took electric cables from an old generator and created a crude fence along the barn's perimeter. If a raider touched it, they would get a painful shock, enough to slow them down if not stop them. It was dangerous and imperfect, but it was all he had. The dragons watched him silently, their eyes wide and alert. Cole knew they could sense danger even before he could. The smallest one crawled close to him, shaking. He reached down, gently stroking its head. "I know it's scary," he whispered. "But you're going to be okay. We'll survive this." The dragon chirped softly, like a tiny ember flickering to life. Cole felt a surge of hope. Trust had to start somewhere, and the dragons had chosen him. Hours passed with only the wind and the occasional distant howl of alien predators. Cole had barely eaten, barely rested. The night stretched on, heavy and silent, until a faint spark of light caught his eye beyond the fence. A raider drone, small and sleek, hovered near the edge of the sand, scanning the barn. Cole's stomach tightened. They had found him. He ducked behind a stack of crates and whispered to the dragons, "Stay low. Don't move unless I tell you." The largest dragon pressed against the haystack, wings tucked tightly. Cole moved carefully to the barn door, opening it just enough to peek outside. The drone sensors were bright, scanning, searching for heat signatures. One wrong move and the raiders would know exactly where they were. Then he remembered something. In his years on the frontier, he had learned to use the environment as a weapon. The cliffs surrounding his homestead were jagged but unstable. A small push here, a falling rock there, and he could create a temporary barrier. Would buy them time. Using rocks and old rope, Cole rigged a system where a single tug could send boulders sliding down the slope toward the raiders' path. It was risky, he could trigger it too early or not at all, but it was better than doing nothing. The drone hovered closer, sensors glowing bright green. Cole held his breath. The dragons seemed to sense the danger too. The smallest one shivered violently but did not move. Cole whispered again, "Almost there. Stay calm." His hand gripped the rope he had set up. He could hear the faint crunch of sand and metal below as raiders approached. His pulse was fast, his mind calculating every second. Suddenly, one of the dragons hissed, a small spark of smoke escaping its nostrils. Cole froze. That could give them away. But the dragon's instinct was raw, it was scared and fear was natural. He whispered, "Not yet, wait." Then almost in response, the dragon curled closer to him, its eyes bright. Cole smiled faintly. They were learning slowly that he was not a threat. They were allies in this fight for survival. He tugged the rope. The boulders tumbled down the cliffside with a thunderous roar, smashing into the sand where the raiders were advancing. The drone wobbled, sensors flickering, and several raider engines stalled, skidding in the sudden debris. Cole took a deep breath. One small advantage, but it was enough to keep them alive for now. The raiders were not defeated, only delayed. Cole knew more were likely to come. He glanced at the dragons. They were stronger now, their eyes sharper, their instincts kicking in. One even flexed its tiny wings, testing the air. Cole realized he could train them, teach them to survive, maybe even fight if necessary. He had done it with humans before. There was no reason it couldn't work with dragons. He returned to the barn, reinforcing the barriers and checking the traps. Every moment was tense, every sound outside a potential threat. He fed the dragons what little he had, watching them devour it hungrily, their tiny teeth tearing at scraps. It was survival, pure and simple, and Cole understood better than anyone that survival required courage, creativity, and absolute focus. As the first pale light of dawn touched the plains, Cole knew this was only the beginning. Raiders would return stronger and smarter. The dragons needed him, and he needed a plan that went beyond traps and rocks. The barn was no longer just a shelter, it had become a fortress of hope. A faint, sharp sound from outside made Cole freeze. Something moved in the shadows beyond the barn's fence, faster than he expected. His heart pounded. The night had ended, but danger had not. He gritted his teeth, readying himself. "Stay close," he whispered to the dragons. "We've got more work to do." The battle for survival was far from over. The morning sun burned weakly over the plains, casting long shadows across Cole's barn. The night had been quiet, but the danger had not disappeared. Raiders were clever, and their first attempt to breach his defenses had failed only by chance. Cole knew they would return, and soon with more firepower and determination. He glanced at the dragons, now huddled in the corner of the barn, their scales glinting faintly in the pale light. They were stronger than last night, more alert, their instincts sharpened by fear but still fragile. Cole's mind raced. He had survived raiders before, but never against odds like this. A family of dragons would draw attention from every predator and criminal in the sector. His barn, his home, could be destroyed in minutes if he didn't think fast. He needed more than barricades and rocks. He needed strategy. He paced the barn, eyes scanning every corner. The tool shed offered scraps of metal and rope. Old energy cells, barely functional, sat in a box. If he could rig a few of them into improvised alarms, he could gain precious seconds when raiders arrived. He worked quickly, wires and sensors tangled around his fingers as he tested and retested circuits. Sweat stung his eyes, but he didn't stop. Every second mattered. The dragons watched, tilting their heads, curious. The smallest one shuffled closer, nuzzling his leg. Cole smiled faintly. Trust was growing. He could teach them, guide them, even fight alongside them if necessary. Their instincts were sharp, and with guidance they could be more than just prey, they could be partners in survival. As he set up the last sensor near the barn door, a low rumble shook the ground. Cole froze. The sound wasn't a storm or the wind, it was raider engines approaching, faster this time, heavier. He ducked behind a stack of crates, heart pounding, and whispered to the dragons, "Stay hidden. Don't make a sound." The largest dragon pressed against the wall, wings folded tightly, smoke curling faintly from its nostrils in nervous bursts. The raiders arrived in force, metal and energy glinting in the sunlight. They spread out around the barn, scanning, shouting commands in harsh, clipped tones. One drone hovered near the roof, cameras spinning, looking for any sign of life. Cole gritted his teeth. This was no longer a simple fight for survival, it was a test of his ingenuity, his ability to outthink enemies who had no morality, no hesitation, and no fear. He remembered the cliffs beyond the barn. Last night's boulder trap had slowed them, but it wouldn't stop this many. He needed something bigger, something smarter. His eyes scanned the old windmill, the wooden platforms, the stacked crates outside. If he could collapse part of the old structure, create a barrier that forced the raiders into a narrow choke point, he could control the fight. The dragons could help. They didn't understand plans yet, but instinct could be guided. Cole whispered instructions, careful and concise. The largest dragon moved toward a weak beam he indicated, nudging it with its snout. The smaller ones shuffled closer, waiting for the right moment. Cole tensed, watching the raiders move confidently toward the barn's entrance. Timing had to be perfect. One mistake in the dragons, and he would die. A raider raised a plasma rifle, aiming toward the barn. Cole's heart leapt. He snapped a line of wire, triggering a small flare trap. Bright light erupted, blinding the raider briefly. He tensed again, signaling with subtle movements to the dragons. The largest pushed against the beam. Another rafter cracked and fell, crashing onto a crate outside, creating a pile that blocked part of the approach. The raiders faltered, surprised by the sudden obstacle. Cole knew this was his chance. He grabbed the smallest dragon, whispering to keep it quiet, and moved it toward the edge of the barn. "We're not out yet," he muttered. "Trust me. Just a little longer." He noticed the raiders regrouping, their communication devices flickering. They weren't used to intelligent, coordinated resistance from prey. This was human ingenuity at work, combining strategy, courage, and timing against impossible odds. Then, something unexpected happened. One raider, frustrated, fired a laser across the barn's roof. Sparks flew and a small fire ignited. Cole's stomach sank. If the fire spread, the dragons would have no place to hide and the barn could collapse. He acted instantly, grabbing an old water tank and swinging it toward the flames, dousing them just in time. The dragons, startled but unharmed, chirped and hissed, responding instinctively to the sudden danger. Cole realized then that the dragons could fight in their own way. One of the medium-sized dragons, sensing his resolve, let out a burst of fire aimed at a raider's hoverboard. The board sparked and faltered, throwing the raider off balance. Cole's jaw tightened. He was guiding their instincts, teaching them to act in coordination with his plans. This was not luck. It was human courage paired with ingenuity, bending impossible odds in their favor. The raiders hesitated, caught between collapsing debris, malfunctioning equipment, and dragons acting unpredictably. Cole saw his chance to turn the fight. He tugged another rope, causing part of the barn's outer wall to swing outward, forming another barrier. The dragons, moving instinctively, followed him, striking and retreating in perfect timing. The raiders, unprepared for this combination of human planning and dragon instinct, began to retreat. Cole exhaled, muscles trembling, sweat and ash streaked across his face. The barn had survived the first real attack and so had the dragons. But the threat was far from over. This encounter had shown him that their survival depended on more than just courage. It required constant vigilance, planning, and teaching the dragons to act in harmony with him. He looked at the dragons, huddled close, wings flicking nervously. "We've done it," he whispered. "But the real fight is just beginning." From the plains beyond, a faint hum rose again, heavier, closer, and more determined. The raiders would return better prepared. Cole's jaw tightened, and a spark of determination flared in his eyes. They had survived today, but tomorrow would demand more, smarter, faster, braver choices. The fight for their lives was far from over. The twin sons of Syndralis had barely risen when Cole realized the real danger was not the raiders, but the planet itself. Dark clouds churned on the horizon, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. Plasma storms, unpredictable and violent, tore across the plains without warning. They could vaporize a homestead in minutes, fry electronics, or turn the red sand into molten rivers. Cole's jaw tightened. This storm would reach them before the raiders even returned. Survival demanded more than courage now, it demanded brilliance under pressure. He glanced at the dragons, now awake and alert. Their scales shone faintly under the rising suns, and their eyes flicked toward the horizon, sensing the change in the air. Cole crouched near the largest one, placing a hand against its trembling shoulder. "Listen to me," he whispered. "This storm can't hurt us if we fight smart. You follow my lead. Trust me." The dragon blinked, almost understanding, smoke curling from its nostrils in nervous bursts. Cole sprinted to the old windmill behind the barn, dragging cables, broken circuits, and energy cells from the storage shed. His plan was desperate, dangerous, and possibly insane, but it was the only way. If he could rig a shield generator from the old colony tech and amplify it with the dragon's natural abilities, they might just survive. The wind was picking up, whipping the red sand into stinging gusts that cut across his face. Each second counted. The smallest dragon scuttled close, chirping softly. Cole handed it a scrap of metal, improvising a makeshift sensor. He motioned to the others, guiding them to specific positions, teaching them instinctively to focus their fire, to act in concert with his pulses of electricity. Their eyes shone with trust and a spark of courage he had never seen before. He realized then that humans didn't just survive, they inspired. They could make the impossible achievable, even in creatures who had never known guidance. The first streaks of plasma hit the outer planes. Bright arcs of electricity lit the sky, turning the horizon into a hellscape of jagged light. Cole's generator whined, sparking and groaning under the strain. He adjusted wires, rerouted energy, and shouted to the dragons, "Now! Fire in sequence." The medium-sized dragon released a controlled burst of fire, aligning perfectly with a surge from the generator. The plasma arcs bent around them, diverted into the barren ground. The barn shuddered violently, but it held. The storm roared closer. Cole ran along the barn's perimeter, guiding the dragons like a conductor of chaos. Each pulse of energy, each burst of fire, each movement had to be perfectly timed. The dragons hesitated only once, and a bolt of plasma hit a corner of the barn, setting it ablaze. Cole doused it instantly with water from a tank, hands shaking but determination unbroken. Failure was not an option, not for them, not for the little lives depending on him. The storm intensified. Lightning crackled across the plains, slamming into the fences and collapsing weak posts. Sand whipped into blinding sheets. Cole ducked under a falling beam, dragging the largest dragon with him. He shouted instructions, coordinating their movements like never before. The dragons responded instinctively, their fire hitting arcs of plasma, their flight keeping them in perfect timing with the generator's pulses. They were becoming a unit, a partnership of human intelligence and alien instinct. A massive strike slammed into the generator, sending sparks flying. Cole fell, hitting the ground hard, ears ringing, heart hammering. For a heartbeat he feared it was over. The dragons shrieked in alarm, huddling close. But then he realized, the shield wasn't gone. It had rerouted itself through the remaining circuits. Improvised, flawed and desperate, it still held. And the dragons, sensing his survival, fought harder, each movement sharper, faster, coordinated. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Sweat, ash and sand covered Cole's face, his arms burned from wiring, and his lungs struggled with the stinging air. Yet he never stopped. Every second was a choice: act, adjust, survive. The storm roared, testing their endurance, but they matched it step for step. The dragons, once fragile, now moved with precision, guided by human strategy. They were no longer prey. They were defenders. Finally, as the twin suns reached their zenith, the storm began to wane. The last arcs of plasma fizzled, striking harmlessly into the distant plains. Cole slumped against a beam, exhausted beyond description, and watched the dragons settle around him. They were alive. The barn, scorched and battered, still stood. Their eyes, wide and bright, reflected relief, trust, and something deeper, a recognition that humans could inspire courage even in the most hopeless odds. Cole whispered almost to himself, "We did it. We survived." The dragons chirped and hissed, curling close to him, their tiny bodies trembling but unbroken. He realized then the truth he had always known deep down. Human ingenuity, courage, and determination were not just survival tools, they were forces capable of changing fate itself. From the plains, distant engines roared, a reminder that raiders were still out there. But Cole didn't feel fear. He had faced impossible odds, survived nature itself, and guided the dragons through chaos. He knew now that no force, no predator, and no enemy could match human courage when combined with intelligence, morality, and sheer determination. The storm had tested them, almost destroyed them, and yet it had revealed their strength. Cole rose slowly, brushing ash from his clothes, eyes on the dragons. "This is just the beginning," he said, voice steady. "And next time, we'll be ready." The plains were quiet now, the storm spent, but a new chapter had begun. The dragons were no longer orphans. They were allies. And Cole Merrick, a single human against impossible odds, had shown that courage could light the darkest skies. The dust settled slowly over Syndralis, leaving the plains glowing faintly under the twin moons. Cole stood on the barn's porch, hands resting on the railing, watching the dragons spread their wings in the soft moonlight. They had grown stronger, braver, and more confident with each passing day. Even the smallest one, who had trembled in fear on the first night, now hopped from crate to crate, testing its wings with small, controlled flaps. Cole smiled faintly, feeling a warmth he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope had returned, not just for the dragons but for him. The raiders had not come back. Cole wasn't naive, he knew they would eventually. But they would return to find not helpless creatures, but a coordinated force, guided by human ingenuity and courage. The barn had been more than a shelter, it had become a fortress, a training ground, a home. And through it all, Cole had realized something fundamental: humans didn't just survive by muscle or weapons. They survived through intelligence, morality, courage, and the ability to inspire others, even creatures who had never known guidance. Cole moved toward the largest dragon, crouching so his eyes met its gaze. "We've been through a lot," he whispered. The dragon's head lowered, nuzzling his shoulder, smoke curling faintly from its nostrils. He felt the bond deepen, a silent understanding forming between them. Humans and dragons, once predator and prey, now allies in survival. He knew that their trust was earned, not given. That trust would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. He thought of the first night he had found them, huddled, shivering, their cries echoing in the barn. At that moment he had faced a choice: turn away, keep himself safe, or risk everything for beings who could not protect themselves. He had chosen courage, and it had changed everything. Their survival had tested every skill, every instinct he possessed, and it had revealed the human capacity to rise above fear and impossibility. The dragons chirped softly, almost in conversation. Cole watched the medium-sized dragon arch its back and release a controlled plume of fire into the night sky. It was beautiful, powerful, and precise, a demonstration of instinct honed by guidance. He realized that this was only the beginning. These dragons could thrive, explore, and perhaps even help humanity survive on a planet as harsh as Syndralis. And all of it had started with one human's courage. News of Cole's actions had already begun to spread among nearby settlements. Traders passing through whispered of the barn where dragons survived storms and raiders alike, guided by the brilliance of a single human. Settlers who had long despaired of life on Syndralis felt renewed hope. If one human could protect a family of dragons against impossible odds, what could humanity achieve together? Cole's bravery had created a ripple, reminding others that courage and intelligence could turn the tide in a harsh, unforgiving world. Cole stepped down from the porch, walking among the dragons. The ground still bore marks of the storm and the raiders' brief assault, but life persisted. He handed the smallest dragon a scrap of food. It chirped, eating quickly, then flapped its wings experimentally. He laughed softly, the sound carrying across the barnyard. "Not bad," he said. "Not bad at all." The dragons chirped in response, as if acknowledging his praise. As night deepened, Cole looked to the horizon. The plain stretched endlessly, full of danger and opportunity alike. There would be more storms, more raiders, more impossible odds. But he no longer felt alone in facing them. He had allies who trusted him, creatures who had learned to fight with him, and a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. Humanity's potential was not measured in numbers or strength alone. It was measured in courage, ingenuity, and the ability to act when the world demanded it most. He thought of the future. He would continue to teach the dragons, help them grow, and prepare them for the challenges that Syndralis would inevitably throw at them. And when raiders returned, they would find not defenseless creatures, but a united force, working in harmony with a human who refused to back down. It was more than survival, it was a declaration. Humans, with their determination and intelligence, could rise above even the most impossible odds. Cole sat on the barn steps, watching the dragons play in the moonlight. The smallest curled against his leg, the medium-sized danced around a pile of crates, and the largest stretched its wings, casting a long shadow over the barnyard. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace. They had survived, and in surviving they had learned something extraordinary. Trust, courage, and the ability to act in the face of danger could change fate itself. The twin moons reflected off the dragon's scales like silver fire. Cole whispered again, "We did it, together." For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel that everything might be possible. Humans had survived harsh worlds before, faced impossible predators, and triumphed against odds no one else could imagine. Tonight they had proven it again. Somewhere in the distance, a faint hum rose across the plains. The raiders, or perhaps another danger, might return. But Cole did not flinch. He had faced storms, enemies, and impossible choices. He had acted with courage, intelligence, and morality. And now he knew that humans, when pushed to their limits, could inspire loyalty, survival, and even greatness in others, no matter the odds. The dragons chirped in the quiet night, wings folding as they settled around the barn. Cole's hand rested gently on the largest head. He looked up at the twin moons, the vast plains stretching beyond, and smiled. Humanity had survived again, stronger, wiser, and braver. And this small barn, once just a home, had become proof that courage could change the universe, one impossible choice at a time. The night was calm now, but the legacy of this fight would last forever. Humans had faced impossible odds and won, and the world of Syndralis would remember. Cole's courage had saved more than dragons. It had illuminated what it meant to be human.